So a lot of times I'd have to take Advil. Advil's my sleeping pill. So to go to sleep at night, I would normally have to take an Advil or whatever. But this night, I woke up the next morning and the meter was laying by my side, and I had fallen asleep. And I thought, wow, there's something going on here. So by removing the charge on my body, I started to sleep better.
You're listening to A New Way of Living with Dan Voss, inspiring you to a new life of breathwork, cold therapy, and plant medicine. My guest this week is Clint Ober. For more than 20 years, Clint has dedicated his life to improving the health of everyone on Earth. In 1998, after a successful career grounding systems in the cable television industry, earthing pioneer Clint Ober began investigating the potential to improve human health with grounding. Today, he is the founder of EarthFX, a grounding research and development company based in Palm Springs, California, through which he helped to develop and patent the first indoor earthing products, which are used by millions of people every day around the globe to improve their quality of life. Clint, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show and share what I can about earthing, and so it's a real opportunity. Thank you.
Absolutely. I can't tell you how excited I am for this conversation. I have looked up to you and your work for a few years now, ever since I discovered grounding. Really in the last couple of years, I would say 2 or 3 years ago, if someone said grounding, I would be like, what is that? And I've really gotten around to this idea of removing our shoes and our socks and getting our bare feet on the ground when we can, and all of the health benefits of that. So I'm excited to go deeper into that conversation with you today.
Cool.
This is something I have been, like I said, practicing for a few years now. So I am aware of what grounding is, but I would love for you to share with my audience, in simple terms, what is grounding or earthing?
Okay. Well, the word earthing is really simple. It means to stand barefoot on the earth or connect electrically. It's an electrical term, meaning that you're going to connect something to the earth. Grounding and earthing are interchangeable words. They mean the same thing. Parts of the world, they use earthing, meaning stick something in the ground, you're going to earth it. And the reason that you would earth something is generally for electrical purposes, to ground your home, to ground the appliances in your home, computers, or in commercial, every commercial building has to be grounded, all and shielded. But it's for an electrical safety to prevent any potential harm from an electrical event. So, but to understand it a little bit, I have to probably back up a little bit. I'm 78, and so when I speak a long time back sometimes. But in the early 60s, I got involved in the cable television industry and broadcast television. And in that industry, when we started out, we would just run wires into the homes and so on. But if there was any static electricity around, certain times of the year, you get all kinds of sparkles and spikes and noise in the pictures. And and if there was an electrical of, like lightning could hit the antenna or the cable or whatever, travel down the line, go into the house and blow up a TV set. So this is in the very beginning. And very few people knew much about grounding except for dynamite factories and gasoline and something that was very flammable. But nobody thought too much about electronics and so on. So anyhow, we learned that we had to connect everything to the earth because the earth is infinitely large and it has an electrical surface charge. So it's a ground. I mean, it's the largest ground in our environment. And so anything you connect to it is going to equalize with the earth and maintain what we call earth potential, the same charge as the earth. Well, it just so happens the earth has a negative charge, meaning it's negative about 20 to 100 millivolts. And that's a very small amount. You wouldn't hardly feel it if you could. And so, but the significance of having a negative charge is that electrons can come up a ground rod into the home, up the electrical wires, and all throughout your home. So all of the electrical outlets they have a ground, that little round hole on the third hole. That's not connected to your electrical lights and so on. That's connected to the earth. And so anyhow, so everything that, and the reason you use that is because I hate to get too technical, but your computer's not grounded, but the chassis, the metal box or the metal housing or the internal metal, around the components and so on, it's what is grounded. And the reason it's grounded, it's like a refrigerator. The old refrigerators used to wobble a lot and vibrate and make noise. Well, sometimes they would, as time went on, they would cut through, an electrical wire and short out, and then the refrigerator would become electrified. So if you touched it, you could be shocked. So, but when you have a ground, then it goes to the earth, and then it'll cause a fuse to blow. So it's all about safety. It's all about preventing fire, electrical fires, and electrical safety to prevent harm to individuals. So, and therein lies the story. I spent 30 years developing cable television and communication type systems, and in those systems, we had to ground every wire that went into a home. We had to ground the entire systems to lead lightning to ground, and to reduce static charges, interference, electromagnetic interference, all kinds of things. So we had to ground everything in order to keep a nice, clean picture going into the home on the TV, nice, clean sound, and today, nice, clean data because of the computers. So it's all about electrical stability, meaning we want to maintain a constant electrical state, so there's no charges, there's no interference, and so you have a nice clean picture or a nice clean. So so anyhow, that's the setup. But anyhow, I spent 30 years doing that before I ever got in grounding. I've been doing grounding for over 24 years now. So I've got 50 some years of hands-on electro, experience with electromagnetism, grounding, and everything electrical. And so, but that kind of explains what it is, what grounding is. The I could go on for a long time and explain all the events and how I actually got involved in this. But anyhow, I spent the first 30 years, grounding communication systems, and then I retired when I was 50, and I ended up a year or so later getting an abscess that had to be in a tooth that they had to go in and do a root canal, and I ended up with the aftermath of it. About a month later, I ended up with an abscess in my liver that was from some of the problem from the tooth, and it took them a long time to figure out what it was. And by the time they had found out what it was, my health was very compromised, and in fact, they had destroyed the majority of my liver. And they sent me home and told me I needed to go home and get my act together, because this was a long time ago. They didn't know how much of the liver they could remove or do anything with. But in the meantime, they told me, go home, get your act together, because you're young enough to get a new liver. You're not an alcoholic, but you don't have time. And so that's a real shocker, especially for somebody that was spent all their life, out there creating and making, just creating business and so on. And so it's like, so this, so it kind of, put the fear of God or a fear of something in me. Anyhow, a week or so later, a young surgeon from Swedish Medical Center in Denver, their office called and said that they wanted to consider doing some experimental surgery and remove as much of my liver as they possibly could. and or save as much as they could, so that I could try to recover.
Mm.
And so they cut out like 5/6 of the main lobe of my liver,
Whoa.
which is that's your energy, that's everything.
Yeah.
And I was turning yellow before, and I was not in good shape.
Wow.
So anyhow, I said, okay, fine, let's do it. I've got nothing to lose. Um, and there's a whole story that goes with that, but anyhow, I did recover from that. And afterwards, after I went through that experience, here I was, king of the mountain, Denver, Colorado, cable TV. Um, there, you made good money. Everything was good, and here I am, about to cash out. And so, what went through my mind when I was recovering, that I looked around the room one day, and I lived in a 5,000 square foot A-frame home on top of a mountain, in Stanley Mountain in Evergreen, Colorado. So I could see all the way to Vail or
Wow.
Denver or whatever. So anyhow, I had acquired a lot of assets, things. But anyhow, when you get close to die, or when you death shows up and the possibility that you might die, it gets your attention, because anyhow, while I was going through all that, I didn't care about anything. But after I recovered a little bit, then I looked around my room one day. I was laying in bed in recovery, and I looked around the room one day, and all of a sudden everything changed in my the um, the trees, the pine trees, the needles on the pine trees, the sky. Everything was more vibrant. There
Mm.
was more energetic. It was more energy. That's all I could say. I didn't know anything about it at the time. Thought maybe there's something wrong with my brain. I didn't know. But anyhow, so a few minutes later, I realized that I almost died, and then went through my mind, what would have happened to all these things that I had collected?
Mm.
Because I had collected a huge amount of really nice art, and over a period of years, and a lot of things, nice home, nice everything. So I realized that kids would have taken this, done that, would have given a bunch of it away, and nobody would have ever known why I bought a particular piece of art, or
Mm.
why I did anything.
Mm.
Because they have their own lives. They would have taken what they wanted, and whatever. So anyhow, I
Sure.
called my kids. I said, you guys come and get whatever you want. Anything in this house that you would have taken had I died, please come and take it, and
Mm.
take all your stuff that belongs to you also, and
Mm.
take it away. And I said, I'm going to sell the house. I'm going to give away everything I own. And I did. Over a period of about 90 days, I gave away everything I owned. I sold everything, including, the home and so on.
Wow.
And I went and bought a small RV, 24-foot RV. And I spent 4 years driving around the United States, spending most of that time in national parks. But I had an aversion to owning anything. I didn't want to buy anything.
Mm.
I didn't want to. I had 2 suitcases full of clothes in that RV. That's all I had, and I still don't have much more than that. And but anyhow, I didn't want to make my life. What went through when that was occurring, what went through my mind was that my life was just about making money, and just about chasing my tail and doing all those things. And all I ended up with is about to lose my liver, and I
Mm.
probably die at 50 years old. And heaven only knows, most men hit the wall at 50 years of age. I mean,
Mm.
they just smack right into it,
Mm.
because they're chasing money, they're chasing everything, and then all of a sudden, their health craters, and sometimes you can't rebuild it, and so on.
Mm.
But anyhow, so that was how I ended up there. I spent 4 years on the road in a small RV, spending most of it in national parks. And what called me there is I grew up in Montana on a ranch, so I kind of had that background, that earthy nature background.
Mm.
And a lot of my best friends growing up when I was young were Native Americans, because we lived out in we lived out in the sticks. But I spent a lot of time with Native Americans growing up, and they teach uh, in their world ownership is they don't understand ownership. they don't know how you can own a tree or the pasture or
Plot of land. Yeah.
put up fences and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's so. But anyhow, I have that thing inside of me. I don't know what it is that you can't really explain it. It's just a feeling. But as time went on, when I well after the when I was down in Key Largo, Florida, and uh, I was feeding that, like I said, the manatee that one time, and all of a sudden there was a sense, intuitive sense that came over to me, and the quote it said, "Become an opposite charge."
Mm.
To a normal person, to like when I was out doing things, I would always be charging people up, charging cows up, charge them up, make a move, do something. So that's what
Mm-hmm.
charge. That's what charge meant to me at the time in reference to that. And then about a half hour later, I wrote down on the same yellow piece of paper, I wrote, "Becoming, status quo is the enemy."
Mm.
And I had no concept of what that meant.
Yeah.
And so anyhow, I had the urge that I had to go do something, so I decided to go back to California, and and I went out there, and I didn't like it there too much, so I ended up going up to headed one day I was headed up to Flagstaff, Arizona. I figured that'd be a good place for me because that's where I grew up. In the tall pine trees and the snow and the cold, and but anyhow, on the way up there, I pulled into a little town called Sedona, Arizona, which is a tourist town, and and I pulled into the RV park. It was dark, and went to bed. Woke up in the morning, looked out, and they had this beautiful red rock and a little creek going by the RV and everything. I said, I'm staying here. This is like living in a national park. So I just stayed there. I stayed there for a couple of 3 years, and but while I was there, I didn't have a lot to do, and I was kind of retired anyway. But I got involved with the local art galleries because this will all lead. This is how it all came about. So I have to kind of share this. But anyhow,
Sure.
I ended up helping a lot of the art galleries. I taught them how to light their galleries so that the art would be better seen and better presented, and just to help them out. They didn't have a lot of money; they couldn't pay you anything, but it was something to
Mm.
entertain me. But in the process, I started working with electrical again.
Mm.
And one day, I was ordering some parts on a little computer and from a wholesale house, and the computer kept crashing. So every time it would crash, I'd have to shut the computer down and then bring it back up, and then it would start working again. And
Mm.
some certain days it'd be worse than others. So I ended up taking a piece. I knew it was static electricity because when I had a lot of static on my body, I would touch the computer. This is back in the late '90s. So I'd touch a computer, then it would spark or little subtle electrical, and that's what was causing this. So anyhow, I put a piece of metal copper tape across my computer, 1 inch wide, all the way across. I took an alligator clip and connected it to a wire and connected it to the electrical ground. So then I
Mm.
would touch the copper tape before I would touch my computer. Problem solved.
Mm.
And so, anyhow, right after I did that, I went outdoors and I was sitting on a bench, and a big tour bus pulled up because this was kind of a tourist area. And out came a tour group, and they were uh, from Japan, and they were a little shorter in stature. And this is what made it, but they were all wearing these white Nike type tennis shoes.
Mm.
And I was a cowboy. I always wore boots, so I never, but anyhow, I could never wear the rubber sole shoes anyway, because I just didn't feel right, but I didn't know why at the time. But
Mm.
anyhow, I was just sitting there, and a thought went through my mind. I said, I wonder if there's any possibility that with us no longer being natural grounding, could it have any effect on our being or on our health?
Mm.
I had not a clue at that time.
Mm.
I just thought about it, and the reason I thought about it because when I was a kid, I was always grounded, and most of the time we were barefoot back in the '40s and the '50s, the only time you wore shoes, you're going to school or going to a wedding or a funeral.
Mm-hmm.
And so, anyhow, I didn't know. So I went home that night and I started doing a bunch of electrical measurements to measure the voltage and the charge on my body versus when I'm grounded and when I'm not.
Wow.
And what I found out was there was all of these extraneous electrical fields in our environment. They're from everything from radio to TV to police cars to airplanes to electrical wiring in your walls. And then you have all of the static electricity, the static charges, because every time you raise your foot up off the carpet, especially if you have a rubber sole shoe, you create 1,000 volts of charge on your body. So you're forever charging your body, and it's bleeding off into the air. Some of it isn't. So anyhow, there's all this noise in your environment. I call it noise, all of this electrical noise.
Mm.
So anyhow, but when I grounded myself to the earth, well, what I did that night, uh, about 8 o'clock at night, I ran to the hardware store and I bought a roll of 3-inch wide metal duct tape
Mm.
that you use for wraparound furnace things. And I and I took and laid it across my bed, connected it to an alligator clip, drew a wire out the window, connected it to a ground rod, drew a second wire out, connected it to a meter. Then I could
Wow.
measure the charges on my body. And sure enough, as soon as I was grounded, they all disappeared.
Mm.
Okay, so that made sense to me. I understood that because that's basic. That's just basic, to eliminate noise. Ground, more ground to, whatever. So anyhow, I didn't think too much about it. I was tired, and so anyhow, the next thing I knew, it was morning, and again, I was like 54, something like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I had a lot of aches and pains because I had raised on a ranch, did a lot of dumb things, like like riding rodeos and whatever,
Sure.
like entertain ourselves. But I also skied for 30 years, played
Oh,
tennis,
wow.
tennis for a few, and so I was
So you had all
quite
sorts
active.
of pain.
Yeah, so I was quite active, but I had every bruise and
Mm-hmm.
all the things that show up. So my body was full of pain.
Mm-hmm.
And the old concept back there, no pain, no gain. That's why I used to have to tell myself that's how I dealt with pain. No pain,
Yep.
no gain.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of times I'd have to take Advil. Advil is my sleeping pill.
Mm.
So to go to sleep at night, I would normally have to take an Advil or whatever. But this night, I woke up the next morning and the meter was laying by my side, and I had fallen asleep. And
Mm.
I thought, wow, there's something going on here. So by removing the charge on my body, I started to sleep better.
Mm.
And so I played with that for a few nights. And sure enough, it was similar every night. I just slept better. So I kept making it a little better, ruined a few sheets along the way. but anyhow, so I get, in Sedona, I had a couple of friends and they were my age. And I said, you guys need to try this because nobody sleeps at night. And everybody's, got pain. And so I grounded them and I said, they don't have anything else to do anyway. You got to do this. And so anyhow, a couple of days later, one of them came over and he said, do you think this could have anything to do with arthritis? I said, no, I don't think so. I think it just makes you sleep better. And so then I recognized that my pain, my chronic pain, had disappeared
Hmm.
almost totally.
Wow.
And so that was kind of amazing. Why didn't I know about this? Why didn't somebody tell me about this? And so then back then, I didn't have a lot of ability to do research on the internet or anything. You had AOL and
Mm-hmm.
Nexus Lexus and a few
Mm-hmm.
things like that. And so, anyhow, I started doing research on it. And I even went down to the University of Arizona in Tucson and did some checking down there and trying to figure out the cause of, why grounding reduces pain. Nobody had a clue. Nobody had a clue.
Hmm.
And you look in the current literature, the medical literature, cause of pain unknown, cause of MS unknown, cause of arthritis unknown. It's still that
Wow.
way today. They don't know the cause of anything.
Yep.
Our medical system is in treatment mode. It's primarily palliative care for older people like me back then, anyway. And so help you cope with your pain, help you manage your symptoms, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was just kind of dumbfounded, and I couldn't understand it. But about a month or so went by, and I said, well, I've got to figure this out because this is too important. It works on everybody that I do it with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I said, well, I'm going to go out to UCLA and get them involved because I had enough money and I could do whatever I wanted. And I went out there and I got a hold of some people in the sleep lab out there, and I said, this, you ground somebody and they sleep better, and so on and so on. And the first thing they said, well, you expect us to drive a nail in the ground, tie a wire around it, tie it around somebody's toe, and they're going to sleep better? They says, get out of here. You're
Mm-hmm.
nuts. You're crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And, and,
I'm
and
sure you've gotten
anyhow,
that a lot over the years.
oh God, yeah. I mean, it's relentless. I mean, all the guys say, well, if this were true, I would have known about it. Somebody would have told me about it. Same thing I said when I first found out
Right.
about it.
Right.
And
Right.
so we're all the same, and we're all programmed the same.
Mm-hmm.
And so so anyhow, I they told me it would take 5 years to or it would take could take 5 years to do a study and get it published. And then they said, or it could cost $5 million, take 5 years, and then there's no chance, or there's no assurance that it would get published, that anybody would care, and whatever and
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And
Mm-hmm.
half of that money went to the university, the other half went to the researchers, and so on. And so I said, well, that's fine, but 5 years is too long. This is important. Everybody I know has got pain
Mm-hmm.
and serious problems. And so that's how it all started.
Mm-hmm.
So, in order to get some information put together, one of the guys said, you really need to do a small study yourself and kind of quantify or qualify what this is all about, and do the best you can to explain it in terms that we might understand, meaning medical people might understand. They don't understand a lot about electrical.
Mm-hmm.
And I know at that time I knew little about biology other than
Sure.
taking care of cattle and stuff.
Yep.
But anyhow, so um, I did do my own study. The first study I pulled together, I had some people from the university help me, and so we got 60 subjects. We split them in two groups. We made grounding mats that are like 12 inches by 24 inches. Put wires on them, and then you connected them to the earth
Mm-hmm.
or to the electrical ground in some cases. And 30 of them had to be working, and 30 of them had to be placebo. And nobody could know which one it was. So we ended up grounding 60 people. It was interesting how we got the subjects because the doctors were not going to give us anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So I was in a hair salon one day getting my hair cut in Ventura, California. And I overheard a couple of ladies talking about pain, and sleep. And so afterwards, I went up to the owner of the salon. I said, I'm looking for subjects that want to participate in a sleep and pain study.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, honey, I can get you all the people you want. So she ended up getting me a half a dozen people. And then I went to more beauty salons. And so we ended up with 60 people.
Wow.
And the only criteria at that time was they had to have it was anecdotal. So you had to have sleep issues and chronic pain. And then what we did is we went to their homes and would install the pads. And I was the only person that knew which was live and which wasn't. But
Mm-hmm.
the helpers, nobody else did, and the subjects didn't know. So
Mm-hmm.
anyhow, but they drew them out of a hat, and so I would do two a day. And so I'd go out in the morning, install one, in the afternoon, install one. So I had to go into the home, measure all the electrical noise in the home, and ground the pad, and because it had to look like it was real, act like it was real.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's how it all happened. And then we had them grounded for on the average 6 weeks. And but anyhow, the real story, how this came, how I discovered grounding, the effect of earthing, was we had two subjects one day that were both real pads, meaning they were really grounded to the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And both of them were about 70 years old. One was a woman, One was a guy. The guy had just had bypass surgery, looked like death warmed over.
Mm.
The woman had severe arthritis in her wrists. She couldn't hold anything, and she was in
Wow.
chronic pain. And so anyhow, I went into the homes, and the gentleman, I did him first that day, and and anyhow, he lived in an adobe house by the beach in Ventura, and I went in there to do the electrical test, and there was no electrical noise
Mm.
in his bedroom. There was no EMF. There was nothing because he was living next to the ocean,
Wow.
and it was an adobe home. It had adobe brick floors, adobe walls that are like a foot thick, and then on the only light in that bedroom was on a chest of drawers there halfway across the room.
Mm.
And so anyhow, I measured him, and the readings were so low that it was just like he didn't need any grounding at all. But
Mm.
he did have all these health issues and so on. So anyhow, that's the luck of the draw when you're doing studies. So anyhow, then I went to the older lady's home, or the other lady, and went into her home, and she had the highest voltage noise,
Really?
electrical noise, that I had ever seen in all the measurements that I had ever done.
Wow.
It was about, it was high static electricity. She had heating pads. She had all kinds of lamps and everything electrical you could think of.
Hmm.
And so, anyhow, in order to measure her body voltage, her son was there. So I put a patch on this hand, connected it to the earth, and a pad on this hand, connected it to the meter so I could measure the voltage in the room and on her body. And then I connected it to the pad, which I knew the pad was working. And so then, as I was doing that, she looked at me and she said, "Well, this one's working, but this one's not," because all she saw was the patches on her hand.
Mm.
And I thought, well, uh, the only thing that's going on here is that one's connected to the earth. This one isn't. So I swapped him, connected the other hand to the earth, and a few minutes later, she's now that was working too.
Wow.
So I didn't really know what to think of that at the time. So anyhow, I grounded her, and then I went about, just that was the end of it. I went back and turned in this stuff, and about a month or so later, when the nurse had gone out there and collected the, the reports,
Hmm.
the interviews and all that kind of stuff. Uh, I happened to be in the office that day, and I noticed that these two people were laying on the desk. And I looked at them, and I said, "This can't possibly be right," because they both had significant reduction of pain and inflammation. They both had significantly improved sleep,
Mm.
and they were both relatively happy. you know.
Mm.
And so I said, this can't possibly be. And so then I recollected the connecting the person's hand to the ground, and I
Hmm.
kind of put it all together. So then I went home that day afternoon, and I pulled out some meters, and I did a bunch of special testing where I would put a capacitor in line in the ground cord, so there's no electrons flowing, no free electrons
Mm.
flowing, and but yet the electric field was there, yet the electrical noise was there, and so on. And I did various other experiments. And so what I ended up discovering was that it was being at Earth potential, the body's being in contact with the Earth itself, is what caused the inflammation and pain to go away and the sleep to improve in these individuals. I hope I'm explaining this properly.
Hmm.
Um, it's like so as long as so then I realized that the only way that could be happening is the body has to be absorbing electrons from the earth, and for some reason it's reducing the pain. Now the word
Mm.
inflammation was not in the English language back then.
Really?
There's no doctor who would talk to you about inflammation. Okay,
Wow.
okay, they just didn't know
Yeah.
because
Now we know.
yeah, now they're busy doing other things.
Sure.
But anyhow, so as an end result, I learned that as long as there's electrons flowing, Doesn't matter what kind of electrical noise there is in the environment. Doesn't matter about any of those things, um, because it's the electrons. You have a positive charge. Pain to me back then was a positive charge.
Mhm.
It was fire, just like fire we're trying to prevent in the communication systems or in the homes or in business. We want to
Mhm.
prevent fire, and we do that by grounding electrical. So by grounding the electrical, the body, then the body equalized with the earth, so it had to absorb electrons from the earth in order to reach earth potential.
Mm.
Now, common sense to anybody that has my background, you can't have fire or you can't have what we now call inflammation in a grounded body because there's no potential to create fire. Okay,
Mm.
you remove the potential, the positive charge. You neutralize the positive charge without a negative and a positive charge, without the grounding effect, or without, yeah, you reduce the positive charge so it doesn't exist. So you can't have fire.
Mm.
If you have a short, then yes, it can create a fire. It's like in the old days, fire was the biggest problem with electrical in the
Mm.
early days. A lot of the big fires that burned down cities like Chicago, everything
Mhm.
else, and a lot of those were electrical fires.
Sure.
Started by electrical events. So so anyhow, I made a discovery that it was the Earth alone that was reducing inflammation, or reducing what we now know as inflammation. But I didn't know how, and I didn't know why.
Mm.
I just knew that um, nobody knew that ground is you know free electrons laying on the ground,
Mhm.
and that are free to move and to reduce charge. We knew that, but we didn't know it scientifically how it would relate to this. So anyhow, the point is, um, I made a discovery. It was the greatest day of my life and the worst day.
Mm.
Or the first day
Why
was
is
the
that?
great, and the second day was the worst, because the first day I made a discovery. The second day I found out that nobody in the world knew about it.
Wow.
So
So you
that
knew
means,
how big of a challenge it would be.
so now you have to educate every person one by one. You have to
Yep.
take their foot off and put their bare foot on the earth, because they
Mm.
don't believe it. They can't believe it. Nobody can
Mm.
believe that just by grounding my body to the earth, that it's going to reduce or prevent inflammation. Inflammation, to put this in perspective, 60 years ago, we invented plastics and we put them on the soles of shoes. That was our big disconnect. Then television, we moved indoors. We started spending
Mhm.
less time outdoors, and then carpets and all that kind of stuff. But
Mhm.
anyhow, before 1960, 90% or more, yeah, 90% of the visits to a practitioner were for infectious disease, acute injury, and childbirth,
Mm.
and 10% whatever. Um,
Mhm.
Today, 99% of all visits to a practitioner are for an inflammation related health disorder,
Mm.
meaning the body's on fire,
Yep.
oxidative stress. To give you an example, autism is now officially listed as an autoimmune disease or
Really?
inflammation related health disorder.
Wow.
Diabetes, MS, lupus, cancer, all of these, cardiovascular disease, these are all inflammation related health disorders.
Mm.
So, what the word, I hate to break this up, but, and if you have any questions, ask me. but,
I'm just so fascinated by everything you're sharing. I'm sure I have
but,
plenty here.
but inflammation, what inflammation is, and, because we had to learn how is grounding reducing inflammation.
Mhm.
It couldn't be explained back then. And only because I had an electrical background did we have a clue. So what causes inflammation is the innate immune system. Our innate immune system works with um, crude white blood cells like neutrophils, macrophages, and so on. And what these white blood cells do is they migrate over to uh, where there's a pathogen or a bacteria or damaged cells, and
Mhm.
they encapsulate, the pathogen, and then they release what we call reactive oxygen species. That would be like bug killer, spraying bug killer on a bug. You know,
Sure.
because it's going. But anyhow, in this case, the the reactive oxygen is ripping. It's strong enough, most electrically strong enough that it can rip an electron from a pathogen or a damaged cell and destroy it. And that takes a lot of energy to do that. It's unbelievable that it exists in the body, but it's going on all the time in our body. So, but anyhow, so that's how the immune system destroys pathogen. It oxidizes them, it burns them up, it catches them on fire, and oxidation is the word. And but still, how was grounding promoting that? How did that happen? And so in 2004, there was a magazine came out, Time magazine. Yeah, Time magazine came out, and there was a picture on it. It said "Body on Fire." And the boys at back in Boston, Mass, Ritker and the boys, they had been researching inflammation or oxidative stress for the 4 years prior to. And so they came out with this major article, headline news article. And it said, you don't have cancer, you don't have cardiovascular disease, you don't have, this, that, all of these named health disorders. What you have is chronic inflammation. And that inflammation will smolder and manifest differently in different people over time based on their genetics, based on their lifestyle, based on their environment, based on their mental. If you live in a chronically elevated sympathetic state, you're going to be forever pumping your body full of cortisol, which is going to create inflammation, which is yada yada, and goes on and on. So anyhow, as soon as I read that cover, I said, well, if that's the cause of all these health disorders, then we know what the cause of inflammation is. Because when we ground somebody, you can't have inflammation. You can't have fire in the body. To make that make sense is the animals who live in the wild, they don't experience inflammation-related health disorder. They don't have cancer, lupus, MS, cardiovascular disease, autism. They don't exist in the animal world. Yet, animals who live indoors with their owners, autoimmune diseases manifest similar, if not the same, as their owners. 50% of all indoor animals die of cancer, just like the adults. 50% of the adults die of cancer.
That's so interesting. I want to share one thing on that, because I have a dog myself, and we go out for walks, several walks throughout the day. We go to the park, and every time we get over to a patch of grass, and I think a lot of it is just because she scents probably some sort of smell from an animal, like a skunk or possum or something, and that's what animals do. They, especially dogs, they want to roll around in that scent. So she'll literally flop over on her back and just roll around in the grass. And I think that's part of her trying to get that scent of that animal. But I also, every time she does it, I think to myself, she's grounding right now. She's getting that moment of grounding when all afternoon she's been inside, like myself.
Getting that static off the body, getting the body grounded, reducing inflammation in her body.
Wow.
And so
it's fascinating.
Yeah. So anyhow, but again, you go back to before 1960, we had infectious disease, we had polio, we had all kinds of health issues, but they were more infectious disease or those kind of things, and malaria and so on and so on. But we didn't have inflammation-related health disorders. But in 1960, then we put it on a graph, but you can see how in 1960 that's when diabetes really started to kick up in the late 50s, early 60s. So there's an exponential curve that's just climbing, and it's still climbing to this day. Everybody out there suffering from autoimmune disease, inflammation, meaning the immune system's doing an automatic firing. It's automatically doing what it's supposed to be doing, but there's no unwinding. So it's burning up tissue. So what happens with the immune system is a pathogen shows up, the sends a white blood cell, it reduces the pathogen by reducing reactive oxygen species. And normally, if you're grounded to the earth, any leftover or remaining oxidative radicals would be instantly grounded at the speed of light in the body. But if you have a shortage of free electrons in the body, then the radicals will steal an electron from a normal cell, damage it, and the process repeats. And so that's the chain reaction that causes inflammation, meaning on fire, burning. The oxidative burst it all starts with an oxidative burst, but when it does not unwind, then it starts to burn up the body. Chronic inflammation is a slow burning fire in the body. And then the immune system becomes so compromised because it spends all of its time fighting the inflammation rather than maintaining health.
Wow.
So
and then by grounding, I want to make sure I get this right. By grounding, we're reducing the inflammation. By reducing the inflammation, the immune system is able to function at optimal health.
Yeah. Always know one thing: health is the most natural state of the body. If you don't have health, then you're doing something in your environment, something you're eating, breathing, something, mental, all these things, but something is stressing you or driving, and you're not, so what we learned is being ungrounded, you've lost that resource that normally buffers and cleans up and grounds the reactive oxygen, the remaining radicals in the body. Now, I remember 20 years ago, it was about you had to eat blueberries all day long in order to but that's not how the body works. That's not how the immune system works. I'm surprised that so many people didn't know this. But anyhow, so the immune system produces free radicals to oxidize pathogens. If you don't have enough redox potential or enough to reduce them excess radicals before they damage an adjacent cell, that's normal. That's what happens in the animal world. They don't have inflammation. So that's what happens. And so in order to, so what we did with all of our studies, we started grounding people, grounding environments. And then all of a sudden, anybody had any kind. You can take somebody with severe arthritis and put an electrode patch in their hand, ground it to an electrical ground in the electrical outlet. And within 5-10 minutes, I don't care how hot that fire is, I don't care what's going on, the pain just automatically starts to cool down. Okay, and so what's happening is the free electrons that are coming from the electrode patch from the ground, it's kind of like cutting the skin, opening up and pouring electrons in there, and those electrons are going in there and reducing the inflammation. So as long as you get grounded and stay grounded, you can't have inflammation. You have to be ungrounded. You have to be like an astronaut. You have to live above the earth or insulated from the earth. And we all do today. I have ground stuff. I'm lucky. I've been 20 years. I've been grounded.
How about how in terms of time? How long do we need to be grounded to get the full effects? Because I will go out, like I said, when I go out for walks. And by the way, I'm in the city. I'm in Chicago, and I have some nature near me. There's trees nearby. There's a park about 4 blocks away, so I'll try to get there on a daily basis. But whenever there is a patch of grass, and usually from, I would say, about May until November, I like wearing flip-flops. Like, I just don't like wearing socks and shoes. I'll wear flip-flops. And as soon as I get outside and get near grass, I'll take those socks or those sandals off, and I'll get my bare feet on the ground. But that might only be for a minute or two. Is that long enough? How long do we need to ground for all the full effects to take in?
You need to ground yourself until the pain stops. Until your color comes back, until your energy comes up. Chronic fatigue is low energy. The body doesn't have enough energy to maintain. But anyhow, that's the number one question I get asked. And I always tell everybody, in nature, you would be grounded 24/7. Your immune system operates 24/7. The immune system is electrical. It needs to be grounded. It needs to have that ground potential, that earth potential, to reduce the free electrons. I mean, the free radicals and so on. So, on the other hand, until if any amount of grounding is good.
Mm-hmm.
The more is better.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have an autoimmune disease, if you have chronic, inflammation, if your health is compromised, then you need to go find a place in the park and take up residency
Mm-hmm.
until you recover. And then once you recover, the more you recover, then you can go back in and ungrounded environments. But people who get too compromised, their health gets too compromised, they pretty much have to do a lot of grounding in order to get back to that normal health. Um, it's really the hardest thing in the world to do. 50 years ago, we couldn't get off the earth. We were barefoot. Uh, we had leather sole shoes. We couldn't wear them if it was wet or water around because they would curl up and you get in trouble when you got home. But so we went from 60 years ago, we went from pretty much barefoot to casual leather sole shoes that are semi-conductive, which are fine, to wearing plastic shoes or synthetic sole shoes that block our ground, cut us off from the earth. Then we carpet our homes with dielectric, things that don't conduct, carpets and wood and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of our cars now, there's no metal. You can't touch any metal in a car. Everything is plasticized. But our whole world over the last 60 years, we've been effectively able to plasticize 100% of our living environment. Now, to go get grounded, the simple thing, you put your bare feet on the earth, may be the hardest thing you do all day. So, but anyhow, when we were doing our studies, we had to make ground planes. That's a mat, like 2 feet long and 1 foot wide or whatever, that we could have people sit on, stand on, lay on, sleep on, do whatever. And then we would, measure the biological parameters of the body so we could, measure sleep, measure inflammation, measure everything. And so we had to create ground planes. And in the early days when we started making those, the subjects and the researchers all wanted them. They wanted them for their moms or their relatives or for themselves because everybody needed what that grounding was doing. They didn't really understand it. They just knew that it worked. And so as time went on, we didn't have a lot of materials, but we would make up little mats and pads, and then we would give them away, or rarely do we ever sell anything. But anyhow, all of a sudden one day, there was such an amount of people that wanted things that we ended up having to make a decision. What is the number one thing that we can give people that can't go to the park, that are at a computer all day with their, under fluorescent lights and carpet on the floor, and their bodies are totally they're electrified. And what can we do? And so we decided that, well, the number one thing we can do is give them something to sleep on. Because the biggest problem with medical protocol is you can't get people to comply. They'll do something for a few days or until pain comes down, and then they stop. So we decided, in order to give them something that would be long-term effective, we figured to put something in the bed. So we made a mattress cover that they could lay in the bed, put a sheet over the top of it. So then all they had to do is put it on one time, and then come home every night and do the same thing they always do: get in bed and go to sleep, and sleep grounded. That way you don't have inflammation, and then the body can heal and restore itself and recover. Wow. So that was our simple concept. And then everybody wanted, little rubber mats, or the little mats like we were using in the studies. because they could use them at the computer, put them on the floor,
Hmm.
or
Hmm.
sit on them, and so on. So to this day, 20 years later, we that's all we really sell is those simple mats.
Hmm.
Um, and we do have the electrode patches for acute flaring arthritis and lupus and things. And and then we're starting to bring out yoga mats because so many of the people do yoga. They have
Nice.
bare feet and bare hands. They need to be grounded.
Smart.
So anyhow,
How
so
do
that's
those how do the products work, whether it's the sheets or the pillowcase or the I know you have flip-flops as well, and how do you get that to be grounded? Like, how do you get it to be conducted and then stay that way long term, especially when it's something that's being washed and things like that?
okay. Well, the mattress covers, you don't need to wash them. They're kind of like a material you would have on a leatherette type sofa and so
Okay.
on. So you just wipe them down.
Hmm.
The sheets, we also have sheets. Those you can just throw in the wash. So what you have is the the mats, the original mats. Those are made of carbon. They have a carbon. They have a layer of carbon.
Hmm.
Um, uh, that's bonded to a substrate, and so it's just a sheet, uh, and then it's got corners on it so you can make it stay on a bed. So that one is so then it's got a snap on it, and the snap connects to a cord. The cord is connected to the electrical ground in your home,
Okay.
electrical ground, unless you want to ground it outdoors. Some people don't have an electrical ground, so they have to use a little ground rod.
Hmm.
But 90% of the people, 99% of the people just stick it in the electrical ground. So when we send them out with a little checker to test that the electrical ground is working and that the products are working. And so then you plug it in, lay it on the bed, put the sheet over it, and that's it. We do have a semi-conductive sheet that goes with them for the people who want it, not necessarily needed, because when you lay on the sheet, your body perspires and hydrates the sheet, and that grounds you to the mat, and so you're grounded during sleep. But a lot of people like the semi-conductive sheet, and people
Hmm.
whose health is really compromised, they need to sleep directly on that carbon mat. I
Hmm.
mean, it's especially I've seen miracles, just days of people. But anyhow, so it's all different for different people depending on their night wear and just so many things. But
Sure.
but people find their own way. The main thing is you want skin contact with the earth during sleep, and the only way you're going to get that is you're either going to go outdoors and sleep, which I don't think most people can do that. I would if I could,
Hmm.
because I know the benefit. And I grew up as an outdoor cowboy. That means we slept with the cows, whatever. So so I always wondered why I like to sleep in the barn or why I like to I camped all the time.
It's natural.
I would rather be outdoors than indoors anytime.
Same.
It was when television came along that we started living in the houses. But
Yep.
anyhow, but the main thing is those devices. They're not the prettiest device, but they're functional. So we created the function somewhere down the road. When people they become more popular, then they can double the prices and stuff and put fancy trim on them, and fancy people can make up prettier things. But
Hmm.
what we've the only thing I was trying to do was, I'm just cowboy logic. Let's give them something that's inexpensive that really works, that's bulletproof, that's going to work no matter what. We have a lot of people that knock off grounding with cotton sheets that have silver in them,
Hmm.
but your body sweat, the salts from your body saturate the cotton and it holds the perspiration and it oxidizes the silver so they don't last very long.
Hmm.
So it's okay if you try it out to learn, but if you want something rock solid, you have to go with carbon. It's the only thing that will withstand skin contact.
Got it.
So anyhow, those products we did produce, and we do sell millions of them. We don't advertise them. We're
Hmm.
not on Facebook. All of our competition and knockoffs are on Facebook, Amazon. But our business is like from day one. It's somebody experiences grounding and they say, "Oh my God, my mom needs this."
Mm.
And so she buys it, tries it, works, gives it to her mom. Then she buys another one. And then she ends up giving it to her sister or a girlfriend or another relative. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's that one woman in every community that's the caregiver. She's the one, and she loves it because it's simple. Don't
Mm-hmm.
have to remember to take the pill. Don't have to, do all these things. You just lay down and go to sleep.
That's right.
No extra work. So that's the concept. And so anyhow, we try to keep the price as low as we possibly can, which is challenging now. But these are products from the $59 range to
Mm-hmm.
a couple $100 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And but people will spend that much on a prescription sometimes.
That's right,
But
or way more over time.
yeah, but the point is, so we have very inexpensive. Try it, see if you like. I mean, see if it works for you. If it doesn't work, no problem. But if it works, then you may want more. But it's really a referral business because you can't run an ad and tell people to buy grounding.
Mm-hmm.
They don't know what it is,
Right.
and they'll laugh at you and say you're nuts. But but anyhow, so the mats are a simple solution. They're not space science. It's something we've used forever in the communications industry, where I come from,
Mm-hmm.
to shield electrical interference, to ground out static, ground out lightning, ground out. So it's just cowboy logic.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk a little bit about the difference between, in terms of now going back outside, natural ways of grounding. Is there a difference between grounding, let's say, on grass, sand, soil, concrete?
Yes.
I'm big into cold exposure, so getting into a natural body of water. Yes, I have the benefits of getting into that cold water therapy, but I understand there's still some grounding effects of getting into a natural body of water. Can you share a little bit more about the differences between all of those?
Well, water itself is not conductive. It has to have mineral in it.
Mm,
So if you take distilled water and measure it, there's no electrical. You can't conduct anything electrical.
that
But
makes
if you
sense.
put some minerals in it, then all of a sudden, then it becomes electrically conductive.
Mm,
So the most conductive thing probably is seawater.
mm,
Lots of salt, lots of mineral,
mm.
very conductive. And all the fish, all the animals, they don't have to get mats or anything. They're totally grounded all the time.
Right.
And by and large, they don't have any real health problems except for human pollution and those kind of things. And then over fishing, over whatever.
Yep.
But we'll stay on subject here. The so the next best thing would just be standing on bare earth. Um, it's like grass would be perfect because grass holds moisture and and it's cool. When you put your feet on in the morning, it's damp, and
Hmm.
so putting your feet on grass in the morning for
Love that.
15, 20 minutes, that's going to probably do more for you than anything because it's more convenient and so on.
Yep.
Rock and gravel and sand, they would be a semiconductor. I mean, there's enough moisture in them
Hmm.
that they're connected to the earth, so there's going to be a certain amount of grounding effect. Sand would be, sand is very conductive by and large because all you do is kick away, quarter inch, half inch of surface soil, and there's moisture.
Hmm.
So it's very effective ground. Even in the desert, there's moisture in the desert below that inch of sand.
Surface sand.
Yeah.
Hmm.
So, so then concrete, to me, probably is the most effective because it's the most convenient.
Really?
Walking barefoot down a sidewalk
Hmm.
or going out and just put a little bit of moisture on your back patio and get a chair and sit down and put your feet on and ground out, you know, just ground out the inflammation.
Hmm.
So people can't get to the beach unless you live near the beach. People can't um, spend a lot of time so that your sand and your beach are pretty much out of the ability of most people, conveniently available. So grass in backyards, that's number one. If you can, if you have a little bit of grass somewhere, um, as long as it's green and healthy,
Mm-hmm.
uh, then just take a chair out, take your shoes off, sit there and put your bare feet on the earth for 15, 30 minutes and let your blood circulate, 20, 30 times. That's going to reduce a lot of inflammation. It'll build back up, but still it'll clean the slate for a little bit.
And is that because that's how long it takes our blood to circulate through our whole body?
Yeah, your blood circulates once a minute.
Once a minute throughout the entire body.
That's hard to believe. That's a lot of capillaries, a lot of blood going very fast under blood pressure.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
so the body's doing a lot of work. We don't out here. We look in the mirror and see ourselves and whatever. We don't realize what's going on inside here. And it's a system. It's an electrical system. Every cell in your body is electrical first, chemical second. If you don't have an electron to move, you're dead. Okay. So the body is electrical first, and then molecules and chemicals and all these things are composed of combinations of electrons and so on. And the body can manufacture a lot of it synthesizes and manufactures a lot of the nutrients it needs itself. How does it do this? How does it even know to do that? We forget what's inside here. It's pretty remarkable. It's actually speechless when you take a look and say, how can that be?
The human body is remarkable.
Yeah. So anyhow, we were talking about the sidewalks are the best because they are the most convenient. But if you have a backyard, keep an area somewhat clean of pesticides, all that kind of stuff, or clean one up. The earth will assimilate anything that's already there in a short order, and but create a little grounding patch or a grounding area. If you can't do that, make yourself a sandbox and put a few inches of sand in it and put it on top of a concrete patio or whatever, and then just spritz it with water once in a while. But anyhow, so you're building an artificial sand. So those are really good, and if you can't do anything else in life, it's like I tell another little story that helps with this, but you have to know what's really going on. When you're not grounded, what's really happening there is inflammation is being created in your body because you don't have the free electrons reducing the radicals and preventing fire. Okay. But you have to ask yourself a question. What's causing all this fire? I mean, what's causing all this inflammation? We know not being grounded causes your body to store it and causes inflammation. But what's feeding the fire? And because I grew up on a ranch, I always tell this story. It might be a little dumb, but anyhow, some years we would have an infestation of jackrabbits. I mean, the year before the grass was long and tall, and the second year came a wave of jackrabbits. Jackrabbits eat grass till the grass is gone. Then they die out and go away. But in the meantime, if there's rabbits, there's going to be coyotes. So you always have an infestation of coyotes. Coyotes, rabbits, grass. It's a system. And it cycles every so many years. So anyhow, what happens when you got nothing else to do some days and you're just sitting there on a horse or just sitting there babysitting cows, you see these races go on all the time, or you see these chases. So here's a rabbit just sitting there eating grass like nothing's ever, that's all they do. They just sit there and eat grass. They don't pay much attention. They just eat grass. And they can produce, 3 or 4 litters a year. That's why they grow so fast. That one couple can produce 50 rabbits in a year.
Wow.
So, and that actually happens in these years.
Yep.
Because there's no real predator until the coyotes start to come.
Yep.
But anyhow, so when the coyotes get there, the rabbits there eating grass, and the coyote sneaking up on the rabbit, and the rabbit eventually senses the coyote, and the coyote springs. The rabbit will spring up in the air, and he can jump like 10 feet in the air. It's crazy.
Wow.
And so anyhow, then he starts zigzagging back and forth across the pasture, keeping one eye on the coyote. And the coyote is lumbering along, chasing the rabbit. And eventually he runs out of energy. Most of the time, he doesn't have enough resource, enough energy to chase that rabbit. So he'll just lay down, end of race, and he'll start panting. And the rabbit will run just a little bit further, but he'll keep one eye on the coyote. And then eventually the rabbit will have a visceral shake. I mean, they're shaking anyway, but they'll have this big visceral shake, and then they'll go back to eating grass like nothing ever happened.
Hmm.
And the reason I tell this story is because to women, and that's who I talk to mostly anyway, is the typical woman gets up in the morning, she's got kids, got to get off to school or manage. She has a husband, got to get them off or manage. And then she's got to take care of her own self to get ready for the day. But anyhow, all the time there's stress and tension going on. So anytime there's stress or tension, there's a squirt of cortisol.
Mm-hmm.
So it's called fight or flight, like the rabbit and the coyote. So when the coyote is chasing the rabbit, his cortisol springs up. The rabbit cortisol skyrockets,
Yep.
and then the chase is on. And it's the cortisol and the adrenaline that give them the energy to do that. But afterwards, there's a lot of inflammation been created, and so you have to reduce the inflammation. So these animals are naturally grounded. So when that rabbit has that visceral shake, it goes back to so it shook off the grounding, it grounded out, it neutralized the charge from the chase, it neutralized the cortisol, the
So
cortisol
interesting.
effect. So so what I tell women to do in the morning, you get up, the first thing you got to think is these are all coyotes. My kids are coyotes. My husband's a coyote.
I'm sure
so
most women would agree with you.
But they're elevating the cortisol, and so all day long, the women feel this more so than men. Men are more simple. You know, they play golf, they do things, you know, whatever. But women are in this chase, and then as the day, I mean, then she has to get ready. She drives to work, so everybody else road rage. They're all coyotes. You know, going to work, the road's full of coyotes or whatever. Then you get to work and you've got shoes on and you go indoors, you're walking on carpets or flooring, and then you go sit at a desk or whatever underneath the fluorescent lights and you're sitting on plastic material and plastic flooring. And so your body is being electrified.
Plus, you're adding on stress from your workday and from
plus you have
everything
the
else.
you have the customers and you have the bosses and the employees.
Right.
So they're all coyotes. And every time you get you get that thing, that anger or anything comes up, that's a coyote. And that's going to pump your body full of coyote juice or cortisol. The cortisol is going to eventually create anxiety, irritability, oftentimes depression. And then if it's left unchecked for years, it's going to manifest as chronic inflammation. And the inflammation is going to manifest as chronic health disorder. And then your life is about meds and docs and poor health. And you just look around, you see it everywhere. So anyhow, you have to learn about the coyote because that's the most important. You have to learn how to control your emotions because it's the coyote juice. It's the fight or flight responses, these miniature chronic fight or flight responses. They're elevating the cortisol that are dampening, I mean, your parasympathetic nervous system. That's the sympathetic response. Your parasympathetic is sitting over here. It's releasing hormones to dampen the effect of the cortisol. But because the parasympathetic has limited resources, limited amounts of hormones, limited amount of resources. If it's chronic over here, then this becomes exhausted, and eventually it can't buffer the
sympathetic side.
Yeah, the sympathetic, and then you end up with exhausted adrenals.
Yep.
Chronic fatigue, and then health disorder starts showing up.
Mm.
And so anyhow, you have to go back and say, okay, coyotes. It's about coyotes. You have to learn how to deal with stress a little better. You have to make sure you ground out the coyote juice, but you have to take charge, because one thing I found out over 24 years of grounding women with, you know, lupus, MS, um, arthritis, diabetes, so many of these things, they have a they had an event happen in their life, especially with MS, lupus, fibromyalgia, all of these, a lot of these cancers and so on. They had an event happen in their life where they had a great loss. One lady lost a house in 2008 because of the housing crisis. That was her dream. That was everything. And then another lady lost her husband. Another lady lost her mother. Another lady lost, but something happened in their lives where
Mm.
they weren't able to manage or deal with grief or let go, or, the ability to let go and start over and
Mm.
so on. So, but living in that chronically elevated sympathetic state is what's feeding the fire of inflammation. It's, so if you can ground it out, that's really good.
Mm.
But if you don't
Sure
ground
is.
it, but if you don't ground it out, then it's slowly going to manifest as health disorder. So it's really important. And women are the ones who suffer the most from autoimmune and inflammation-related health disorders, and it's
Mm.
because they're the family and the kids, and they're that kind of caregiver, and they're kind of,
Yeah.
you know, and so on. Husbands are a whole lot different, and
Mm.
so anyhow, that's the message I have for women, because, and it's simple. If you can't do anything else as a woman, when you get home at night, you have no option. You have to go outdoors and put your feet on the earth for 15 to 30 minutes and ground out the coyote juice.
Yep.
Ground out
That
the
makes
coyote.
such perfect sense.
Then you're going to be so much easier to get along with, and 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 you can put up with the the kids and all of the chaos that goes on. And most of all, you're going to sleep better. And if you can do it in the morning, it's really good, because the road rage goes away.
Right. You can set yourself up for a day of less stress and less
Yeah, yeah.
coyote
So
juice.
it's more than just, so grounding is, there's two types of grounding. One is, there's there's actually three types, but anyhow, there's one is being grounded to prevent inflammation, prevent fire in the body. That's
Mhm.
number one. Grounding number two is coming to terms in your mind with who you are, what you can do, what you can't do, and coming to terms with it until the stress goes away sufficient that you can wake up in the morning with a smile on your face. Even if you have to live in a tent, you do whatever it takes, because the cost of losing your health is too great. So
Mhm.
the most important thing you have is your health, and it's free.
Mhm.
So you really have to find a way. And everybody's story is different. Everybody's life is different. Everybody's thing is
Of
different.
course.
But the sympathetic nervous system, the fight or flight, it's all the same in all of us.
That's right.
It's about survival. So the
Mhm.
body wants to survive, so it's trying to protect us. But we have to teach our body what's a real threat, what isn't, how to manage stress, how to manage everything, just how to deal with things,
Yeah.
how to be a little happier, how to
Mhm.
be, not uptight or upset all the time. Just, you got, because that's what the beauty of grounding is. You go outdoors, take your shoes off. You can't be angry and upset when you're grounded.
Right.
That gets drained out of your body.
That's right. So true. That's something that I often don't think about when I do grounding myself,
Uh-huh.
until you just mentioned that now, is, I put my bare feet on that grass and I
It
feel
just,
good.
yeah, all the anger goes away, and
Yeah.
and, yeah,
And much of that I think is being in nature in general. Like I find the same thing when I'm just in nature, in general. I don't have a whole lot of stress. I don't have anything that I'm worried about or angry about.
yeah,
But specifically feet on the ground, all of that goes away.
yeah. And the third type of grounding is when you're standing in nature, whether you have shoes on or not.
Mm.
You're close coupling, electrically close coupling. Uh,
Mm.
to explain that, if you've ever seen a kettle drum, a big drum, When you
Mm-hmm.
hear two of them side by side, you start beating one of them, and then the other one starts vibrating.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so that's that's close coupling. So the closer they are together, the more they'll match up. So when you are standing in nature underneath of a tree or in a field or
Yep.
whatever, then the earth has energies and rhythms,
Mm.
and they're subtle, but our bodies dance to those rhythms. And so when you're there, then you sync up with the earth. You electrically sync up with the energies and the rhythms of the earth. And so now all of your hormone cascades, everything in your body is more rhythmic,
Mm.
um, and you breathe differently. Everything is different. But that's
Yes.
another type of grounding. So getting out in nature is vital.
So true. I
Yeah,
appreciate it. And everything you've shared, in this conversation, it makes sense, especially that story with the coyote and the jackrabbit. And
yeah,
it's so much around the work I'm doing with breath work and reducing stress and cold exposure, the reducing
yeah,
anxiety and depression and things like that. And this tool resource, that's what I look at it as, is a tool of grounding, is
yeah,
just one more way to reduce inflammation
yeah.
and really probably one of the best ways to reduce inflammation. And
Well,
in that you're reducing the stress and anxiety.
yeah. I've done a lot of breath work over the years, since started 20 some years ago. Breath work is another really beneficial way to calm the system down,
Hmm.
and so it's not like anything is a cure all to anything. Everybody's lives are different. Everybody's stresses are different, but
Totally.
but these simple natural modalities that we can do ourselves are
Hmm.
they don't cost a lot, if anything, most of the time,
Hmm.
and they're just life changing. But it's
That's
really
right.
about reducing mental stress, with breath work is plays a big role in getting rid of the tension and stress in the body.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's all important. Yoga, Pilates, all of these things. You have to
Movement.
move. You have to move your body. You
That's
have
right.
to you have to breathe, and you have to move your body. And Nestor, I just did an event with
James Nestor.
yeah, James
Cool.
Nestor, and it was called anthropology. It was about original not medicine, but uh, healthcare.
Yep.
Original, by before there was modern medicine,
Yep.
and the modalities and all those kind of things. So, and breath work was a big thing,
It's huge.
and yeah, and going into some of the native cultures, breath was such a big part of. They work themselves up into these breath. I mean, I don't have all the words in front of me, but
That's what I find so fascinating with it is that and very much like grounding is breath work is and you can take that term or leave it. I like to call it more conscious breathing or intentional breathing,
right.
but it's something that has been in our DNA, a part of our lives for
Hmm.
really forever. It's the same thing with grounding, same thing with having bare feet on the ground,
Yeah,
and it's just really in Western culture, it's
yeah,
specifically with breath work, it's something we're finally coming around to the idea of what it is and what it means. And same thing with grounding. It's we're finally peeling off those layers of, oh, this is what it means, this is what it does, even
right.
though it's been a part of humanity since the beginning.
Yeah, yeah. The thing that happened to us, we invented electricity,
Right.
we invented plastics, um, and we all these things, and then television and computers, and so we're so enamored with the light, whether
Hmm.
it's a TV screen or a computer screen or whatever, that we don't see. We've lost our peripheral vision. We've lost
Mm.
Nate. We've stepped aside from nature.
It's like we're in tunnel vision.
Yeah, and we're going to pay the price. We are paying the price,
Yeah.
and so it's really, to me, it's really important to um, grounding is essential because it's mechanical. I mean, it's physics. Um, you need electrical stability so the body can function properly. because the body will return to normal if you put out the fire. Because in the last 60 years, inflammation started 60 years ago. I've been working on this for 24 years, so 36 years ago or whatever it was, but that's how modern this is.
Right. Well, we appreciate people like yourself that are bringing awareness to the idea and really making change. So thank you.
Well, cool.
Clint, this has been a great conversation. Before we wrap up, where can people find you? I know you have a website. We talked about the Earthing movie that's free on YouTube. What else would you like to share for resources?
Yeah, for more information, the Earthing movie, The Remarkable Science of Grounding, it's an award-winning documentary. I think there's been about 5 million views on YouTube on it, and it's commercial free on YouTube. And so to gain more information, that's a good resource because there's a lot of credible people, credible stories. It's 100% authentic. And so it's really, women love it and they pass it around. So that's a good place. Earthing.com is where they have the little mats and things like that. This is a good weekend to buy them if you're, because they have their sales in the fall and stuff. And then the earthinginstitute.net, that is a resource for all the studies. We have many, many millions of dollars worth of research that's been done. A lot of it is, really eye-opening. We know the cause of pain now. It's free radicals in the immune and oxidation by the immune system. We know the cause of a lot of things. But also the main thing is we know that's all good. But the main thing that we learned is, health is natural. And if you just do what nature do, find your way back to nature. Incorporate nature back into your life as best you can. And so that you can have health, free health. You do not want to go and get medical care if you don't have to, even though the insurance company's paying for it. You don't want to go there.
So true. Well, Clint, with that being said, thank you so much for joining me today. I really enjoyed conversation. I have my dog laying behind me here. She's ready to get outside. So we're going to get out for a walk and get grounded and get those shoes off and bare feet on the ground. But Clint, thank you for your time today.
You bet. Take care.
All right. You have a good one.
Yep. Take care. Bye.